Meanwhile, he's then going to head on to several Asian countries, including Japan, South Korea, China, the Philippines, and Vietnam. So our focus tonight, Pyongyang's complaints about new sanctions against the regime, calling them genocidal and brutal. So is that evidence that President Trump's efforts and the world efforts are working? Let's talk about it with Ambassador John Bolton and John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Bush administration. Gentlemen, good to see both of you tonight. And hopefully you can hear me all right. Let's plow ahead here, because we know that North Korea is going to be top of mind in the visits with all of these Asian countries and with all of these Asian leaders. Meantime, with that as the backdrop, we're now getting something that Democrats in the Senate have introduced a bill that would tie the president's hands with some of the things that he could do with respect to North Korea. John, in your estimation, is it constitutional?
No, I think this bill would be completely unconstitutional. As you know, the Constitution makes the president the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It's always been understood that that means the president can choose what weapons to use to protect the national security of the United States and for our policy interests. Congress has never tried to pass any law under Republican or Democratic presidents trying to prevent him from using weapons to protect the country. I think it would be flatly unconstitutional, and actually, I think shows how desperate I'm afraid some people are in Congress to take advantage of this very serious imminent threat from North Korea and try to score political points off it.
Ambassador, here is what Senator Murphy, who's one of the sponsors apparently of this measure, says. He says, we need to take the president seriously when he threatens war, because the dam could break at any moment. Republican and Democratic senators are alarmed over the path we're on, and it's important we join forces to reclaim Congress's constitutional role in matters of war and peace before there's no turning back. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think he understands the Constitution. As John said, that's not Congress's function. It's to respond and to declare that a state of war exists. But take Pearl Harbor, since the president's about to go there. The Japanese attacked on December the 7th, 1941. Congress declared war on December the 8th. When did the war begin? Began on December the 7th. And the fact is, the real constitutional authority is the president's as commander-in-chief. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president has to wait for the United States to be attacked. There's nothing in the Constitution that says he cannot act until Congress does. And indeed, to fulfill his responsibilities, he is fully empowered constitutionally to act in anticipatory defense. And I think these measures, look, we've seen Congress try to get involved in this so many times in the past. They passed the War Powers Act after Watergate. It's a complete charade, and so is this. It's pure partisan politics.
Ambassador, I also, before we leave this topic, want to ask you about China and whether you think that we've been tough enough with them when it comes to dealing with North Korea. Obviously, they have slightly different interests than we do, but at the end of the day, getting this rogue regime under control with regard to its nuclear program should be something that would benefit both.
It should, but in fact, China's been jiving the United States for 25 years. They've said repeatedly they don't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, but they have not followed through on their really unique capability to force North Korea to that end. They upped the sanctions temporarily, and then when the U.S. turns its eyes away, it's back to business as usual. That's frankly why this trip to China by President Trump is so important. There is no more time to deal with North Korea. They are on the verge of getting a deliverable capability to hit us with thermonuclear weapons anywhere in the continental United States. And it's really time for China to tell us whether they're serious about this or not. Otherwise, the president's going to have to look to act unilaterally, Senator Murphy to the contrary notwithstanding, to protect the American civilian population.
Excuse me. Today we got a decision with regard to Bo Bergdahl, and he's not going to jail. So, John, do you think it's appropriate?
Now, as you may know, the prosecutors in the case recommended 14 years, dishonorable discharge, and a reduction in rank to private. And the judge, for reasons I do not understand, gave him no time and dishonorable discharge. This is a person who pled guilty to deserting his fellow men and women in uniform on a battlefield faced by a hostile enemy. I'm afraid that this is one of those cases that calls for very strong measures of justice, because men and women in the field, our young men and women in the field, have to be able to depend on their fellow brothers and sisters who are next to them. And they cannot be worrying in the back of their minds that someone's just going to wander off base and desert. Plus, you also have to take into account that our military then expended a great deal of time and resources and took casualties trying to find him because they assumed that Bergdahl had actually been kidnapped rather than had deserted.
Yeah, and we heard from families and from men whose lives were changed forever because they were out there searching for him and suffered grave harm in the process. The president tweeted today of this: the decision on Sergeant Bergdahl is a complete and total disgrace to our country and to our military. Ambassador, final word to you.
No, I think that's exactly right. This is a stain on the military justice system. Bergdahl pleaded guilty. There are no facts in dispute here. There's no mitigating circumstances. There's no reason to give precisely the sentence the prosecution recommended. I think the prosecution came in too low. But it's I just think this is going to cast a real pall over the morale of the armed forces to see this kind of person effectively walk away.
All right, Ambassador and John Yoo, great to see both of you tonight. Thank you for your time.